Welcome to Shifting Perspectives.
Biblical conversations about topics that matter. Let's get to it. Welcome back, everybody, as we continue this series on finances. Taboo subject people oftentimes don't want to talk about. And I think probably tonight we're going to talk about one of the harder subjects. Although I think a lot of people are beginning to recognize that this particular subject really does have negative implications on their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that subject is debt. I don't know very many people at this point that don't have one or two or three or five credit cards in their wallet, and they may have, may have the capacity in one shopping spree to flip their net worth and to make their paycheck upside down if they're not intelligent in how they deal with debt. But it's interesting because you work for a lending institution, right? And so you deal with people who are borrowing on a regular basis, and the Bible says that the borrower is slave to the lender. Debt is not advisable. The Bible is very clear in multiple passages. Don't get in debt. What's your thoughts on how we navigate that in a modern world?
Sure. So that's a good landmine field to walk through,
right?
I mean, that's.
I teed that up real well for you since you work at a financial institution.
So let's talk about. I mean, whenever you're talking about debt, we need to understand. And again, the most people don't study debt, even though they have it. They go make decisions, they go make purchases, but they don't realize the cost of debt. So let's talk about the first thing that keeps us from getting into the first mine in the minefield is not having a reserve savings account.
That's right.
I mean, you kind of left last week with, hey, you may want to buy a pizza, you may not want to buy it, you may want to eat at home. Well, if you don't have a reserve, you're only one ruined tire, one blown whatever in your car, a TV going out, something like that.
Oh, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Yeah.
A TV going out, a refrigerator quitting, all of those things from a challenge. So here's the thing. If you don't have an emergency fund, debt comes up, you've got one or two places. You either go to a high price lender or you go to a credit card.
Well, a credit card is a high price lender.
Yes, it is.
Most people don't read that fine print. 23 to 28%. Yeah. So for every $100 you spend, you're going to give a quarter of that back to them for that $100 for the freedom to use it.
Yes. And it's the price of convenience.
That's right.
It's a price of convenience.
That's very high.
It is. So, that is one of those things you have to realize. So whenever we talk about debt, we talk about the debt is in a sense taking somebody else's money, holding it for a period of time, and then giving it back to them with some extra. And so you have the high price debt, you have the finance places and the credit cards, and those things are very expensive. But then you go into other things of just consumer debt. I walked past a store the other day, and you can pay your shoes. You can buy a new pair of shoes and pay them off in 6 payments.
Wow. Okay.
So that's high price debt. Just to be real clear, that's probably got a 30% debt service on it, but you're doing it for 6 months. And so the dollar
seems small.
It seems small, but it's not. You're really paying double for that pair of shoes.
Right. Yeah.
And so then you go into kind of where people think is a little bit more safe debt. Let's talk about cars, trucks, car loans. All those. That's safer debt. Okay. And in today's interest rate environment, a car loan is anywhere from 6 to 10%. I mean, you can find less than that, you can find more than that, but that's where, on the bell curve, that'll be where half of them are at. And this is the cost of debt is I now go buy a vehicle for $20,000, $30,000, and it's going to depreciate approximately 10 to 15% per year. So I have a 15% depreciation. I have a 7% interest. That car cost me, with that depreciation plus interest, 20+% per year, which is almost the same as your credit card.
Pretty close, yeah.
But we don't think about it in terms of adding those two things together and the cost of the vehicle.
That's right. That's right.
And then you get into a little bit more of like a home loan and those things. And yes, they're still debt. They're longer term debt. And what you always want to make sure is you have plenty of capacity to handle what goes wrong. Homes are a little safer in that interest rates are lower and the asset appreciates.
Right.
So it gains, on average, real estate gains about 6% a year, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of a real estate loan right now is about 6%. So it's almost a wash.
Right.
You just don't get to recapture that appreciation until you sell it. So all of that being said, that's the nuts and bolts of the different types of debt.
Right.
And but look at the freedom of being debt free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is where Scripture goes, and I'll lean into you for a little bit to run with that. But look at what can happen if you can put yourself on a financial plan to get to the point that you're debt free. And now, instead of paying somebody else back, you can start paying yourself back, which allows you to be a good steward of money. Go back and watch last week's video and be able to give more and bless more without having to work more.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I teach principally as a philosophy is delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes those purchases are point of sale type purchases. What do I mean by that? You can go through Walmart and they've got stacks upon stacks of candy bars, gum, mints, sodas, magazines, all the stuff that is point of sale items that while you're standing in line, they have they're positioned in a way so that they have, same as in real estate, we call it curb appeal,
Mm-hmm.
that they have the appeal that draws you while you're standing there in line. Oh yeah, I want a Reese's peanut butter cup, or I want a soda or whatever to stack onto the bill. It's designed to be that way, but oftentimes we spend our money that way.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Walmart and you intend to go in and you've got your grocery shopping list, and the next thing you know, you got a cart full of stuff because you walked by and you saw this and you just said yes to it. I can have it, and it becomes really, really easy. It's convenient to just swipe a credit card. Same thing with cars. Oftentimes we don't shop cars. We don't pick a model and a plan and know what that car's worth. We go to the car lot and we drive around and we see the one that looks nice, the one that we think that we would like, and we buy it on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
We might have been able to drive 30 miles and find $3,000 to $5,000 difference in that car, but we don't have delayed gratification. And one of the things that I always try to say is, if I'm really dealing with God's time, God's talent, God's treasure, He owns it all, and I have a responsibility to manage it. And I belong to Him as a believer, where I'm supposed to be being led by the Spirit of God. Why would I go and make a purchase that's going to impact me pretty dramatically without first resting, bringing that before the Lord and waiting on Him?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a Christian principle that we just often don't think about in terms of Christianity. I mean, I know tons and tons of Christians that will point of sale purchase a car or furniture or, a new computer or this or that. I mean, you can pick any of those things. We just don't really think about that. The Lord really wants us to walk in relationship with Him. Now, I wouldn't dare go buy a car without talking to my wife.
Right.
I don't know if you would or not. I mean, that's just not wisdom. But we'd have no problem going and buying a car without talking to the Lord and asking Him if that, given our understanding of stewardship, if that is how He wants us to steward the resources that He's put into our lives for that particular vehicle. And so delayed gratification says, I might want this, but I'm willing to wait to make sure tomorrow it really still is something that I want. And oftentimes you'll find contentment with what you have, or maybe contentment with something that's a little less than what you were looking at when we think in terms of stewardship, if we would just apply that principle.
And that's one of those things when you talk about that and those purchases, it all boils down to one thing. And it's the one thing that in my field where I work at, and I talk to people that are struggling or have had something happen, the thing that is missing, and I'm going to say, I can't tell you statistically, but based on my observation, is people 95% of the time do not have a budget.
Right.
Very simple. I make this much, I spend this much, and it gives me this much. you know, if you're looking to make a financial change in your life so that you can be a good steward of God's money, it starts with the pluses and the minuses. It's simple math.
Mhm.
But people don't like to do that because oftentimes that exposes the fact that I think I only went out and ate once a week, but I actually went out and ate 3 times a week, and it cost me more, or what that $7 coffee every morning actually adds up to over 30 days. There are opportunities there, and one of the things that we fail as a church, as and church being all encompassing, is in my conversation with pastors, and I've told you this many times, so you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
I have offered the Bible has, and there's some very good financial counseling programs out there.
Mhm.
I'm not a fan of the most popular one.
I'm not either.
So there's some things, and I'm not going to say his name, but I'm not a fan of the most popular one. He's got some good principles, but he's got some holes in the philosophy. But oftentimes we are not teaching finances in church.
Nope.
And I have offered to do free financial training for churches without a single dime being cost the church. I've offered it with 7 churches. I've never been taken up once. And, I think that speaks to where the church falls short is this subject is scary. To go into a church where 75%, 80% of the people are borrowers and say borrowing is not right.
Mhm.
Scripturally, that's a tough thing to do.
It is.
And like we talked before this, I've been a lender all my life. I'm also a borrower.
Mhm.
So, it's getting to that point of saying and what type of borrowing and lending am I doing? And that's where you go into what is the stewardship that I have, and I'm teaching and training people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That's part of the reason why this is a taboo subject, because Christians only hear one subject being preached from in the pulpit, and that is either tithing,
Yes,
which we're going to talk
we're
about,
going to talk about,
or it's generosity. But something that both of those things that kind of revolve around giving, right? And so they don't hear other principles. I think that's one flaw. I think the other flaw, to be completely honest, is we live in a society where we compare ourselves with everyone else.
Yes.
So-and-so's got this vehicle, so-and-so's got this house, so-and-so's got a Razor or, a fancy side-by-side, and so-and-so's got a camper, and so-and-so's got a boat. And we start thinking in terms of we need to look like them.
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's a real bad principle to live life by and to manage money by.
Yeah. And it is. And I know we're running along on time. One last example. I was a rookie lender, been a lender for less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy pull up, nice car. I knew him. He was well known, comes in, he wants to buy something. And I was so excited. This is 20 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so excited. And, I looked, and then I run his numbers, and he couldn't afford to eat that night, I don't think. And I remember going, wow, he's got all this stuff, but he's struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'll never forget, there was a guy that I knew, he pulls up, and he had a blue or a brown truck with a blue fender on it. And he come in, and I'm like, this is where it goes back to your judging part of you. Brand new, never forgot this lesson. And he said, I want to buy this. And I said, well, we'll have to see. I don't know. And I remember looking at me. He said, well, I know you're new here. He said, so you need to look at my account. And I looked at his account, and my eyes got really big. And he said, I think I can get a loan. And I said, yes, sir, you can. And that goes back to how quick we judge.
Yeah.
But it's the people that save that can.
Mm-hmm.
And if we spend, we can't save.
That's right.
Spending and saving work in opposite of each other. And we just don't always realize that.
Yeah. So, hey, sorry about going long tonight, but, again, these are subjects that don't necessarily get dealt with very, very often.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot that can be said about debt. We didn't even touch on debt as a tool, debt as a resource that might have value.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on good debt versus bad debt,
yes.
Smart debt. But we didn't really even get to dive into that just
right.
because it takes too long. So make sure you type a question in the comments. If you've got a question about debt, how should we manage debt? What's good debt? What's bad debt? What does the Bible really say about debt? We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, please.
We'll see you next week.